In today's video, we're going to be talking about how and why we recreated the opening of Euphoria season 2, episode 5, the thoughts that went into it, and some of the things that we did, lessons learned, and yeah, a lot of things. So, the first thing is first is why did we do it? So, when I went to film school, our goal was always to make films. Our desire was to use everything that we learned and use it. So, this was an opportunity for all of us to explore where we were in terms of skills. And back then, we hadn't started our writing classes as of yet. So what we decided to do was to find a script and just remake it. So we went through the process of casting. I believe we cast for these roles. We had people do self tapes and auditions for stuff like that. I wasn't really involved. They involved me as a director. Like my main thing was always to be a DOP, but they involved me as a director because a lot of people want to be DOPs, which is fine. Like for me, I just say I'm a filmmaker. So I had choices, and then why I chose this script was the challenge. And I'm someone who likes working with actors, but in scenes that have a lot of tonal changes. And I feel like this is it's interesting and it's hard at the same time because I didn't write it. Usually, most of my shorts are written directed by me, and I know the characters, their motivations, and things like that. Whereas in this instance, I didn't know, and I had to interpret stuff. And I know that it's a big show, but I haven't watched Euphoria. Like I at this point, I hadn't watched it, so I had seen memes and stuff like that, and I knew Zendaya acted in it, but I wasn't quite knowledgeable a lot about it. I did some research just to try and find and see if we could come up with the tone and not go far from it. So for the opening scene, the room dictated really what we could do. So in this room, when you see this bed is elevated from the ground. So you didn't have a lot of space where you could put a camera on a tripod. And even if you wanted to do handheld in this room, it was almost impossible because there was no space and then there was no else to put the crew, like the sound guy and stuff like that. So we ended up going in a corner and the camera is on a slider. So I asked him to start out of frame and sort of pan because other characters would walk in. Um, and then in the edit, what happened was, so in this instance, because back then we hadn't learned how to manually focus the camera, what happened was he was using autofocus. So because this is on a Sigma lens, one of the challenges with autofocus, and in this case, if you see the camera is not focused on the girl, it was focusing, I'm probably assuming, on the clothes or someplace. So there was a lot of soft focus. But then for me, the performance was way better than in the ones that we got good focus. And in terms of framing, you will see this in a lot of stuff that I shoot and in a lot of stuff that I direct, how I like to frame. So one of the challenges that I have here is basically because of the bed's height and how I think high the tripod, because we didn't want to show the seat. So in this, it's a lot of challenges that we had to contend with. But one of the things that I like with this framing is how you see we called a rose. Just we wanted to confuse the actors so that they don't know that we are remaking Euphoria. Um, but one of the way that I like to set up when I have three actors is to have them form a triangle and then we point at the main focus, at the main character. And then through the eye line, we're able to show who we're paying attention to. So in this instance, mom characters whom we are focused on as the characters, but our eyes as an audience goes towards Rose. But then the challenge that I had with this in the edit was the focus. So right now I don't even know where the focus is. It feels like it's on the clothes, really. The choices. So this was more of the actors that were available. So in order to find an actor to play mom, we are a bunch of students, and for us to ask elderly actors and be like, "Hey, can you be available for this thing? It's for free. We are remaking Euphoria. It's not gonna go anywhere. It might even be taken down on YouTube." That's an impossible task to do. But it worked out. And in these days, we really didn't have a lot of production design, so we were actually lucky just to get a room that sort of is similar to the situation that happens in the actual episode of Euphoria. And then you have this scene where we walk out. So In the original episode, she walks into a bedroom, but we didn't have access to that, so we were just looking at different spaces that we had at the house, and this was one of them, and this worked out for me as well. So like once again, I have three actors. I like to form triangles, but in this one, I would have squished them more into where this cup is, because that's just how I'll do it in terms of the triangle. Because I still want us to have leading lines to the main character, but have the eye lines dictate where we look at, and just have that feel. Like in terms of production design, it's funny how this actually sort of worked out for us. And then at this point in time, we had I think at school we had just learned about. So at this point, in my school, we had just learned about blocking and having your characters move and giving them specific directions just to narrate the story. So you find that I told her to walk and then come here to retake the place that her sister was standing, but this makes the character more powerful, right? So now she's closer to camera, she's bigger in frame, and that was the idea. And then at this point, she takes over the whole frame. It becomes about her. We've separated her from her mom, which is something that they also do in the real episode with Zendaya's character, where a lot of it is on faces. So in terms of this, we couldn't really do that just because of the room, and also in Euphoria, it's a stage, right? So everything is shot on stage, so they can do more in terms of camera movement, but not really us. And then one of my quirks is we didn't have lights in this space. For some, I think if you put lights, you would see them, and then we didn't want to use this house light because it was way too warm. But then, what can you do? And if you've ever heard of script supervisors, one of the main things that they're important for is in the edit, because I have to cut from this scene to when she turns around. And this is something that I learned, that I need coverage of a lot of these things. We didn't have coverage. So her hands are down, and then on the turnaround, her hands are up. So it's like, damn, how do you make that cut? But it was a learning moment. In this, the mom speaks to her, and I wanted to show the change in the character. So how she goes from having it all and for her realizing what just happened, which is the same thing that happens with Zendaya's character when the same thing happens. So one of the other things, I think this, I've started having handout show that shakiness, and we just showing that we are not in long and a normal stance. And the DOP at this time, he suggested doing a Dutch angle just to create that feeling. And then for all this stuff, we were now just on handheld just to mimic Euphoria, because we are shooting Euphoria. So yeah, you have to stick to it. But I would say shout out to Lou, man. Like she really played the role of mom, and I felt like we could really sell it. And I think it's something that worked. She's not an old lady, but she's a young person acting as an old lady, and she really did her job well. And I think that shout out to costumes as well. They just knew how to do it. One of the challenges that you always have with Windows, right? It's how do you when you're exposing. So like one of the advice I've been given is always expose for your highlights, but we didn't know much. And then shout out to D Hands, I mean, because of them, we were able to get the film emulation going. So yeah. And then for this scene, we really struggle with it. Like, how do we sell a stunt and how do we sell the slap? But I think it works. She didn't really get slap, people. Other than that, I think everything else we did, like I like the actress here, Sophie O, like the way she got involved with the character and she just sold the character in terms of like how crazy it is. It's one thing that I did in this thing was I made them know that once they realized it was Euphoria, I was like, we're not remaking Euphoria, we are making our own version. We just here to practice, and that's it. So we don't necessarily have to copy paste. And then so yeah, like I I ended up just telling her like, you don't, we are not remaking Euphoria, we are making our own film. So for the final scene, we found this attic in the place that we were shooting at, and we're like, oh, this will be pretty cool for us to have the final moment and just separate the characters from each other. Um, whilst by no means any big production, we didn't have any crazy, we didn't have any sort of budget for this. This is basically my camera, my lens, my friend's tripod, and my friend's house. We just used what we had, the resources that we had, and we remade it. I don't know if it's impressive. I don't know what it would do, but for me, the experience was interesting, working with experienced actors. And one of the things that I suffered from that day was I really felt out of depth. Like I felt like it was bigger than me because obviously I knew what it was, but also I felt like I didn't know what I was doing as a director. Like it's not my vision, right? It's something that's there that we're remaking, but also how do you talk to actors? Like how do you tell someone I want you to act like Zendaya, but it's how do you guide them? And one thing that I learned was you let actors go, and what you then do is sort of guide them in terms of this is what I'm thinking. When I interpret the script and when I'm going to edit it, this is what's going to make it look great. And it's a collaboration because actors are performers, they're there to perform, and you are there to guide their performance into a piece, into a masterpiece. And we are all collaborating. I feel like for me as a director, my job is not necessarily to dictate the performance, it's to allow people to interpret something into the vision and be responsible for the final project. Whether that is people saying we like it, it's me saying thank you for your performance. This is what I saw in my mind, and here we go. And we take it from there. And it was quite an interesting experience. I hope to one day direct an actual episode of Euphoria. I hope to one day to work with the Zendayas of this world, but I hope to work with my team in creating more and more projects like this. It was quite a phenomenal experience shooting on location, working with natural light, with artificial light, and trying to capture those moments, and being in there and just being the leader of the team. Directing is quite an interesting thing. And as a director who has the eye for footage, the one main thing I'll say I took out of this is communication is key, and you also need your prep time. Don't play on prep, man.